Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Samantha Johnson, and I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement at the University of Colorado Boulder's Leeds School of Business. Leeds is a top business school offering undergraduate, MBA, MS, and PhD programs, and has an alumni network of over 41,000 strong, living and working around the world. We're excited to have Rachel Shane presenting on how to present like a pro for today's webinar. A few housekeeping items before we begin. First, if you have any questions now or during the presentation that you would like to ask Rachel, please send those questions through the chat interface. I will monitor questions as they are submitted, and Rachel will respond to them at the end of the presentation. As a reminder, for optimum audio quality, we do have everyone on mute except for myself and our speaker. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please notify us through the chat interface, and one of our support specialists will touch base. Lastly, a link to access the webinar recording will be sent to all registrants later today, along with a survey link. Now, I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Rachel Shane is a culture, talent, diversity, and inclusion executive who helps companies drive innovation and growth by turning their beliefs, habits, and systems into a unique company operating system. This helps companies create a competitive advantage that fits the new definition of innovation. Throughout her career, she has helped guide some of the world's leading brands, including Procter & Gamble, Nestle, Alibaba.com, The North Face, Tap Influence, Zayo Group, Colorado Tourism, and more. She is a mentor at Blackstone Entrepreneurs Network and Greenhouse Scholars, a member of the University of Colorado Women's Council, in addition to serving on the Leeds Board of Alumni and Friends. Welcome, Rachel, and thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thank you so much, Samantha, for that fabulous introduction. It's amazing how those decades start to stack up of experience. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I am Rachel Shane, and I know that you've dedicated time, and it's quite precious, and I do want to let you know I truly appreciate you giving that, not only to me for this hour, but also to yourself to learn something new and hear some new ideas. I spent a professional lifetime giving presentations and enrolling people in ideas, working with the big brands that you just heard and big ad agencies, and now running startups. And there is one core thing I've learned about presentations, and that is you really do need to connect with your audience in order to convey ideas. So here's how you can do that. So this is me at 5 years pre-IPO for Alibaba, and if you haven't heard of them, it's a great little wiki check. And my job was to launch this brand in the US and help get entrepreneurs comfortable with sourcing overseas. And so this man here is Jack Ma. He's one of the founders of Alibaba. And part of my job required flying over to China every month and talking to the founders about our really exciting and interesting advertising strategy in the US. This was a big, big move and a very secret strategy for Alibaba to be warming up the US market before IPO. And so my first time going over there was, you can imagine the nerves, the pressure. I had never met Jack before. He was already legendary. And I walk into this really large conference room. It's beautiful. It's austere. It's beautiful. It's chic. And you should know I'm 6 feet tall and I'm quite addicted to wearing heels. So I walk in and I'm realizing already that I may have missed the cultural mark just a skosh on my outfit and attire. Might have gone with something a little more demure, a little less makeup, to be honest. So I go in there, I'm all set up, and you should know, like at this point in my career, I feel like a presentation badass. So I've got decks, charts, printouts. This thing is hooked up. We're ready in advance. And boom, click, slide one. And Jack he pauses me. And already, like, my butterflies are crazy. I'm ready. This is a massive presentation. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't get past slide one, and I'm already being stopped. So Jack says, oh, excuse me, Miss Rachel, but I did not fly you all the way to China to view your PowerPoint deck. I believe there is no power and no point to PowerPoint. Please close the screen and let's have a discussion. And in that moment, I got my #1 best lesson in presenting, and that is that it is all about the presenter, and it has really nothing to do with these slides. So let's talk about how you can take advantage of this approach as well, maybe with a less shocking example. So today, we're going to talk about how presentations have devolved and 10 steps to powerful presentations. Also, one step on a webinar is going to be good sound. And for those of you who know I'm not in full screen mode, that is because the sound is better this way. So thank you for the texts. So let's talk about that. And then you should know there's also a summary handout, which you can see Samantha attached over there in your WebEx control panel. And I spun up a Pinterest board with additional resources, which is on my Twitter feed today, and also the URL here later. And then we've got plenty of good time for Q&A, and I love that part. So please do ask some questions. I love to engage in that and ask me anything that's on your mind, really. So how have these decks devolved? We're going to start with this video, and the funny thing is it's from 2012, and it's still 100% true today. So let's just take a quick peek at this 2-minute video.
There's some things I hate about PowerPoint, and I figure it's kind of my duty to point them out. So here we go. Here's common PowerPoint mistakes. Number 1, people tend to put every word they are going to say on their PowerPoint slides. Although this eliminates the need to memorize your talk, ultimately this makes your slides crowded, wordy, and boring. You will lose your audience's attention before you even reach the bottom of your first slide. Please don't do that anymore, please. Number 2, most common. Many people do not run spell check. Big mistake. Nothing makes you look stupider than spelling errors. If it's got a red line under it, recheck the spelling. And then finally, I hate this. Avoid excessive bullet pointing, only key points. Too many bullet points, and your key messages will not stand out. In fact, the term bullet point comes from people firing guns at annoying presenters. Hence the bullet point. Bad color schemes, not good. Clashing background and font colors can lead to distraction, confusion, headache, nausea, vomiting, and loss of bladder control. I can't stay on that one too long. Here's something I've noticed. The number of PowerPoint slides you have in your talk, the less useful your talk actually is. Unfortunately, my presentation is right there. I've also noticed this. People love to pack data into their presentations. They just shove more and more data thinking it's better, but it's not. The more data you have, the harder it is to read your slide, and the effectiveness plummets. Now you can improve the effectiveness by adding some shading and some 3D effects, and then some second order and third order effects, and then, I know, let's add some labels. That'll help a lot. And that's pretty much every marketing slide I've ever seen right there. Yeah. Then some like VP of marketing standing there going, it's real clear in Q4. What the hell are you talking about?
Let's look at this guy, my little buddy, the goldfish. What's interesting about him is that he has a 1 second more attention span than humans do. His is 9, ours is 8. So imagine how many meetings you've been in that are clearly going to be a lot longer than 8 seconds. So what's happening, right? So this is about the presenter as much as it is about the audience. And that is that shorter communication is the new norm. We are actually, at the end of the day, you're competing with Google's speed and brevity. That's terrifying in some ways, but something you can actually take advantage of. Here's what else is happening with presentations. We have, as human beings, something called working memory. And many people believe that their working memory is much better at work than it is in life. But here's a really interesting example about that. This is my boarding pass from a flight recently, and just like every other average human, I had looked at this thing 6 times just to know that I was in seat 9C, a very simple number-letter combination. and yet I had to look at it 6 times. So how much information do you think anyone remembered from a presentation you gave recently? Because that working memory is equally bad at work and in life. And then it's compounded by this. The 3 biggest fears today. Like, where's my connectivity, right? So distraction and time poverty are the great equalizers. Therefore, if you want to transfer ideas to someone, you must understand their mindset. And frankly, our minds and our technology are at odds with each other. It is, in fact, your issue and your audience's. But if you treat presentations like an experience, like a conversation, it opens up a tremendous amount of possibility. If you do nothing else during your presentations, help your audience make sense of the information. That is the key. So, when's the last time you were in a meeting that was 0 to 15 minutes? Because that would have been your best one for getting information across to somebody. The biggest issues in presentations tends to be length. It's every single thought in the presenter's head and all of these slides. And at 45 minutes, you're bordering very close to a 50% attention level. Imagine what's to the right of this bar chart here. I mean, TED Talks aim to change the world and start a movement 18 minutes flat. So why does your marketing strategy need 90 minutes? Start by creating an experience that's shorter than what people are used to. That alone will get their attention. Work within the confines of attention as a tailwind instead of a headwind. And know that short and brilliant is much harder to craft than long-winded and forgettable. But I'm pretty sure the information you're sharing in your career are absolutely worth it. All right, Super Debbie Downer here on a roll. So if you're not in person, just like this conference call, statistically, 65% of you right now are doing something else, and roughly the same number are also sending email. I hope that you'll come back and listen. And in this survey, funny enough, they also found out that 1/3 of people have reported falling asleep while on a conference call or a webinar. And then honestly, my favorite part of this survey, and I had to share this with you, is that people were on webinars or conference calls while at McDonald's Play Place, behind a church during a wedding rehearsal, a pool in Las Vegas, and my ultimate favorite, chasing my dog down the street because she got out of the house. So you are competing against a lot of things. Therefore, there are really 3 types of presentations. DOA, you look at the first slide and you're like, I'm mentally done, I'm out. Forgettable, okay, they'll sit through it, but remember none of the information. And then number 3, the one we all want, is inspired. And if you go through 4 key actions, which is prepare, plan, practice, and present, you can absolutely deliver an inspired presentation, because you only have to be interesting, not perfect, hopefully as evidenced by our audio fund this morning. You are more amazing than any slide will ever be, and your authenticity, expertise, and excitement about a topic and the stories you tell will win over data every single time. Think about it as a voyage of discovery and intrigue. That's what a presentation really is. All right, action 1, let's prep. There's a physicality to writing and planning something out in ink. It takes your thoughts from something in your mind to something tangible. And you're thinking about the 3 key points you want to make in a presentation. Not 20, not 5, it's actually 3 core points. That's the most you can actually get across in a presentation. And then this is my favorite, it's the hustle rule or the CEO rule. And that is, if you came into a presentation and everyone was late and you were only left with 5 minutes, which slide and which point would you want to make? Those are the ones that you want to hit really hard and practice more and repeat during your presentation. So that preparation begins with knowing your audience. You need to know what they already know. What do they want to know? And honestly, what do you need them to believe before you're finished? That's the core to an inspired presentation. Knowing them helps you connect with them, and it gives you entryways through which your information and delivery are relevant. Doesn't everyone want to be relevant? But what that really means, people love to talk about relevance, and the word gets thrown around a lot. What it means is that you are creating meaning. You are helping shape something. Instead of throwing data and bullet points at someone, you're helping it make sense to them. You're
You're helping them understand where it fits in their life. So here's an example of that physicality of writing. I was asked to do a presentation for Boulder Startup Week with the heading of Grit and Grace. And then they said, okay, you go from there. And I started by looking at some of the blogs people had written about the previous year's Boulder Startup Week and the things that they wish they had seen or not seen or were curious about. And I was like reading through a bunch of Medium posts, and I settled on this idea of courage, of courageous leadership. And this is my presentation, honestly. I put all my thoughts, individual thoughts, on sticky notes. I ordered them and reordered them. You will notice this was a 6-minute presentation, which required a lot more work. And then I figured out my 3 key points, which are confidence, caring, and courage, which you can see across the bottom there. So this is how I do it. Some people like to print things out, put them on a wall. They use a giant whiteboard and they just want to write on it. But there is a physicality to that that really creates a lot of depth of content and gets your mind wrapped around the story in a really elegant way. All right, action 2. We are going to plan. So now that you know your audience, plan an experience for them. At the end of the day, even if you're on stage for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 90, or you're at a trade show, it's your show. You control the visuals, the content. You can bring in props and videos. You can plant questions. And if it's a long, all-day type of meeting, when are you bringing in the sugar? When are you bringing in the refreshments? What's the lighting? Is there music? Think of it like a show. Again, you're competing against Google. The expectation is entertain me, make things make sense for me. And that really is your role as a presenter. So here's a great way to think about a presentation. This is a snowboarder, P.S. not me. I don't know how to use the half pipe. But I was lucky enough to have cocktails one night with a woman who coaches TED speakers. And the nugget she shared with me has stuck with me for years since then. And that is that there are 2 critical moments in a presentation. It's the launch and the land. You're never going to do a trick in the air or land well without injuring yourself if you don't actually take off well and launch well. So the beginning and the end are actually your most critical moments. If you think back to the beginning of this presentation, there is very much a reason why I did not start with an agenda slide. In fact, if you'd like to just kill your audience immediately, start with an agenda slide. All right. Facts bore and stories soar. That's my little phrase I like to use. Because do you remember a story from your childhood? Pretty much everyone does. Do you remember stats and data from the meeting you were in yesterday, though? What about this morning? Probably not. Stories are memorable, and they tend to be something that is retold. And if you're trying to enroll someone in your ideas, your thinking, the vision, the mission of a company, don't you want your brilliant core ideas in your presentation to be retold? Then give them a story to retell. In fact, I like to think about the decks we create in our offices as the most prolific form of content marketing available. And yet it's grossly misused and leaves a lot of available power completely untapped. So if you think about a story, it's a way to take that narrative and shape those written notes, thoughts, and stickies together with an arc of problem, solution, aha, resolution. Super straightforward. But if you think about it that way, your presentations will change remarkably. You'll notice also, again, there are not 20 morals to the story, maybe 1 or 2, right? All right, now you're building slides. This is the part most people start with, and you'll notice we do not start that way. So what are you going to remember, right? Are you going to remember the left? Are you going to be engaged, intrigued, and pulled in by the person? Or are you going to remember all of this stuff on the right, which, by the way, I found by Googling bad PowerPoint slides. Human connections are memorable and more interesting. Let me give you an example of exactly why that's true. Your brain computes visual information 100 times faster than what it hears. Do not build word-heavy slides or read slides to people. You've probably noticed I'm not reading slides to you guys today. If the second you do that, you are giving them permission to just check out because they know they don't really have to engage with you at all. And in fact, hearing and seeing the same words feels repetitive. Remember, you're competing with the likes of social media and immediacy and pictures and action. So be interesting. And there should only be 6 objects per slide and 1 idea. This one's a nightmare. Let me repeat that one more time. 6 objects, 1 idea. That's about all anyone can focus on, no matter how clever or smart and engaged and tuned in they are. That might mean you have a lot more slides, and that's fine. All right, the next action. Time to practice. This is by far the thing that everyone blows off. And yet, it's the key to shaping ideas in someone else's mind. It's also the key to your confidence and performance, which has a direct effect on your career. If you come through, your ideas will land, and that in itself is memorable. Don't underestimate the power of a great performance and a great presentation in the corporate world. Startup knows that. It's like the back of our hand, but I think corporate could use a good reminder on that one. So I love this quote, and it's from a guy that wrote a book 80 years ago called How to Win Friends and Influence People, and it's still one of my favorite quotes from him. Because trust me, everyone does practice. Unfortunately, it's either during their presentation or it's before, and clearly I would recommend the before part. Think of it like a sport. Individual or team, you're never going to show up for a match, a Tough Mudder, try, or a game, whatever, without practicing. And when you rehearse enough, it becomes second nature. It lets you focus on the meaning and the authenticity, and it lets you come through. I'll tell you one of my personal favorite methods, and it's a little embarrassing to tell everyone this, but my personal method, I actually record the audio for a presentation into my iPhone using a voice memo, and then I listen to it. I go on a walk or I listen to it in the car, and it allows me to memorize the content, so then I can start to shape it and make a much more personal presentation. Presenting great content has a lot to do with knowing yourself and managing yourself. Authenticity is your most compelling asset. Remember, you are the presentation, not these slides. The slides are simply visual aids. So once you've thought about that, your confidence is in place, you're working on presentation, the visuals as we've talked about, you also start to develop your own personal style. And while you might take a page out of some other speakers that you like, definitely be you. You could be the quiet, thoughtful person. You can be very big in a room, but be you and learn to control your voice. Use the instrument to your own advantage. And then there's all sort of the parts, the hands. What are your hands doing? Where are they pointing? What are they telling your audience? Where are you looking? What's your posture like? That shoulder roll back is very effective. And your energy and your enthusiasm, bring it for these. Bring it. Even if it's a status meeting, be you, be there. And now this is an important one. We've talked about your slides are a visual aid, but you also need to know when there's a slide present or a screen present at all. People love screens. We love them. We're totally addicted to them. There's a reason why I don't use my iPhone for notes during a presentation. Try it and watch. Everyone will watch your phone, even if they can't even see the entire screen. Or if your computer is on the table and people can see it clicking through and can see your notes, it's very, very distracting because the screens win every time. So don't get upstaged by them. Remember that information is only interesting one time. I'm totally breaking that rule during this webinar, but I think it's very important. You probably figured out that it's one of my core points. Kits. So I made up this idea of a kit, and it has served me very, very well. And that is that I have this little mesh bag, and inside it are the dongles I need because, of course, I have the Edge Case Mac, and it requires all sorts of attachments to do a presentation well. It has an extra pair of glasses, it has mints, it has some throat lozenges, and it has, I'm sure I mentioned my power cords. But everything I need to run a presentation, I never rely on a venue. That's my rule of thumb. Okay, another thing that you're going to notice here is that this slide, and a lot of these slides have a dark background. Let me show you why. I'm going to flip back and forth a couple times. Notice how your eyes feel. White, black. White, black. Ah, it's amazing. Most corporate templates are white, and it's pretty painful on the eyeballs. Black is much more comfortable for your eyes to view, and it actually allows the focus to stay on you because then you are the brighter object in the room, which is pretty interesting. And then on a webinar, I like to use black still because it's comforting color. Another thing about these two slides, this is a slide, this is a handout. Big difference. This is everything I'm telling you right now, but if I give you this as my slide, you don't need to listen to me at all, actually. And that's a shame because I'm the presentation. Another thing to notice, do you see how small the headline is on this one? And then on this slide, it's huge. And this is exactly how the template comes, big headlines. Here's the difference. On this slide, what are you focusing on first versus this slide? On the darker slide, not only are you more at ease with your eyeballs, but I have you also focusing on the points I want to make instead of the headline. The headline's okay, but it's not the main point of a slide. It's not the main point of my visual aid. All right, enough of that game. So now, action 4. It is time to slay this presentation, my friends. So, you've got this, and here's how. This is Amy Cuddy. A lot of you have heard about her uber famous TED Talk, and I realize it's like TED crazy in this presentation, but there's a reason for that. They're so well trained and practiced. What she's found was really incredible, and this gets missed sometimes when people talk about her. What she found was actually that the nonverbals affect your own outcomes, not just the way other people see you, but also the way you see yourself. Like, that's kind of mind-blowing, right? Your own nonverbals affect the way you show up. So she recommends doing this for 15 minutes before a presentation to boost your cortisol levels, which gives you a really acute mind and jacks up your confidence to this really great level that helps you slay a prezo. I don't know about you, but if I walked by someone in their office and they were doing this or at their cube, it'd be a little awkward. So I'll be honest here again and just go ahead and be embarrassed again. I've done this in my car. So I go for a walk, which I recommend anyway, and I do this in my car, and then I come back in. And if you're short on time, then you do the Superman pose for at least a couple of minutes. But it does make a difference. It changes the vibrancy of your being. All right, these little suckers, these butterflies, please know that everybody gets them before a presentation. But how do you respond to stress? Have you slowed down enough to really think about it? Most of us, it's very natural. We want to get past things that are painful, that don't feel good. And so you speed past really sitting with this feeling and understanding where it's coming from, and thereby figuring out how to control it. So I'll tell you my tricks. I take a walk, even if it's quick, before a presentation. And I pop a throat lozenge in my mouth, and I crunch it up while I'm walking, which sort of displaces some energy. And then there's this product called Wish Garden, which you can get at like Whole Foods and Pharmaca and other places like that. And it's called Deep Stress. It's a not very delicious tasting herbal concoction that actually does sort of round the corners on your stress levels. And I never do a presentation without it. I definitely took a few pumps of that before this webinar even. And then something most people overlook, and that is that your audience wants you to do well. If it's your team, it's a big auditorium, it's the C-suite, they actually do want you to do well. And then when you're in your presentation, you feel these butterflies rising, feel your feet on the floor firmly and scrunch your toes into the floor. Know that you are settled. You've got this.
You're looking at a woman who was publicly silent for a decade. Obviously, that's changed, but only recently. It was several months ago that I gave my very first major public talk at the Forbes 30 Under 30 Summit. 1,500 brilliant people, all under the age of 30. That meant that in 1998, the oldest among the group were only 14, and the youngest just 4. I joked with them that some might only have heard of me from rap songs. Yes, I'm in rap songs. Almost 40 rap songs. But the night of my speech, a surprising thing happened. At the age of 41, I was hit on by a 27-year-old guy. I know, right? He was charming, and I was flattered, and I declined. You know what his unsuccessful pickup line was? he could make me feel 22 again. I realized later that night, I'm probably the only person over 40 who does not want to be 22 again.
Presentations are really about storytelling, which we've talked about. You're transferring an idea. You're not up there to be some mythical, perfect showman or show person. And if you think you can't present well, I want to share this story with you. So Monica Lewinsky, who I'm assuming most of you know or have heard of, was doing a huge presentation about shame and harassment. And she's been dormant for a long time after what she went through. So here she is at the big TED stage in 2015, and she felt physically ill during rehearsals. I mean, she wanted to just, ugh. And she actually wanted to just cancel the speech. She had tried the breathing, she had done the power posing, and she was still a wreck. The TED organizers convinced her to stay, and they allowed her to have notes on stage. And if you watch this, you'll see that she's got a music stand up there with her notes, which is not something that TED speakers typically have. But here's what made the difference. She wrote at the top of the page in huge letters, "It matters." She found a way to control her butterflies because she reminded herself that her nervousness about getting up on stage wasn't nearly as meaningful as her desire to help other people struggling with harassment and shaming. So please do watch the clip. And when you do, notice how she begins with a story, and you can see her physically relax as the audience laughs along with her. It's pretty amazing to witness, and it was very brave. You are absolutely your best asset. Have a presence and own it. Be you. Be uniquely you. Nerves are natural, and they keep your mind sharp. Expect them and keep breathing. And then learn to read body language. Learn your own. Everyone's got a camera handy or a video device handy in their phone. Figure out what your body language looks like. How do you move through time and space? And then learn how to adjust a few things. You don't have to change, but you can fine tune. So a couple examples I like to give. One is this idea of called the fig leaf. And so a lot of presenters, they'll get nervous, they don't know what to do with their hands, they'll hold them down in front of their body, often sort of centering in front of their pelvis. But what that tells the audience is you don't really want to be there, and you don't want them to engage with you or ask any questions. So that's definitely not the route to take. Another one is arms crossed. So this tends to be more in the audience, but also some presenters will do it. Same thing, don't know what to do with their hands, so they sort of start to cross their arms. I usually try to keep a clicker or a pencil or something in one of my hands because it keeps me, it helps me notice where my hands are moving. And if I start getting overly jubilant with my hands, if you see any video of me presenting, you'll see I love talking with my hands. So I've learned to fine tune it a little bit, but it's definitely still there, and it's who I am. It's how I present. So when you see your audience having arms crossed, that's very interesting. Sometimes it means someone's cold, but oftentimes it means they're skeptical. That's a great person to make eye contact with. Pull your skeptics in. All right, another one. You'll see people bobbing around. Wow, that's a lot of nervous energy, and it starts to freak out your audience. So try not to be bobbing all over the place. Now, if you see an audience member, however, leaning in just a little bit, it's slight, typically accompanied by a head nod, they love what you're saying. It's interesting to sort of clock what you're talking about right in that moment because you know it's a very powerful point. In general, the key to managing your body language is to keep your bottom half steady and your top half animated. And then triangulated eye contact. That's why we've got this little triangle yellow man over here. So please don't picture your audience naked. Don't look at their hairline or their hair. Instead, make eye contact in a triangular shape. You can look left, top, and right, and then reverse order or go left to right to top and make eye contact. Even if it's just for a few seconds, it will pull people in. And then other people in the audience know that you're making eye contact. They'll also pay more attention. It's pretty interesting. All right. This is never a slide, but this is in fact a handout that you all have. And I wanted to be able to talk about it even for just a minute. So you all have this. This is the Pinterest board I mentioned, which has a lot more presentation resources on it. And this is in fact a leave behind in a handout. In fact, you'll also notice it's white so it prints well. And every one of you has an option to grab that over in your go-to webinar control panel. What I want you to remember is this isn't about perfection. It's about you being you. You are the powerful presentation. And you know what? It matters. What you're sharing matters to you. It matters to your audience, even if it's a couple people. And it matters to the business. Know that. Take them on a journey. You already have the best presentation asset, right? It is you. Be brave enough to break the mold of presentations and leave your mark. And with that, I would love to take some questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Rachel. And we do have a few questions here for you, but I do want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, you can submit those through your chat interface in your GoToWebinar panel there. So feel free to ask those as they come up. So Rachel, question for you here. The question is around, similar to what you're doing today, so presenting in person or presenting via video conference. If you had the choice between the two, so the two options are to travel, to be able to present in person, or to stay remote and do via video conference, or like you're doing today with the webinar, which would you prefer of the two and why?
Sure. Oh, that's a fantastic question. We like to think that we're in a connected world and that Skype and Zoom and all of those things can replace a human being, but it has its own challenges. I would have to very carefully think about the situation and assess it. What are the stakes for the presentation? Do I need to know these people on a personal level to be able to collaborate better with them in the future? And I would think through things like that. Maybe I'm new at a company and I really need to sort of set the stage for who I am and what my belief system is. And in that case, I would absolutely travel. I would certainly try to make the most out of the trip, but in person will always win. Video's not terrible, and you can learn, certainly to still control your environment as best you can. You still want to use pauses, and you can still get quiet and louder, so you could still come through that way, but I will say in person wins every time.
Thank you. So another question for you, and we've had a few of these come in. So you talked about keeping your slides light and really making the presentation about you and the knowledge that you're sharing and you're talking about. What is your suggestion when you have a presentation that's data heavy or that you're having to present a lot of facts or stats?
Absolutely, and there is, there's fact-based selling. You need something to back up the stories, right? So it definitely doesn't mean be devoid of stats and such. What I like to do, literally I call it a placemat. If you have access to sort of large format paper, and if it's in person, what I will do is I will print something out with the key stats and still the key takeaways from those stats, but I'll make that its own page or its own PDF to accompany the presentation, and essentially becomes part of the leave behind packet. So again, if it's in person, you've got this great piece that you put in front of everybody at the right time. Know that when there's paper in front of somebody, they will read it and look at it, and it pulls attention away from you, but it's definitely helpful. And then you've got a lot of people wear glasses. Screens it's actually hard to take in a lot of data on a screen. It's an amazing thing to have that as a printout. And if you're on a webinar or video, let everyone know at the beginning, hey, before we begin, please make sure everyone's printed out the handout, type of thing. So it's a great way to allow someone to take in data is by putting it on its own. And then the other trick to that is, this is grounded in the advertising space I just came out of, but we would give, presentations that are 100, 150 slides or big creative presentations. And Ad Age did a big study, and precisely 0 people will ever open that deck again. So that's where I first learned the magic of having sort of the executive summary as handout. They will open that again, but they're never going to open this giant PowerPoint deck and try to find the one page they need. So honor and respect your audience and your own personal brand enough to take the extra time to do a great handout.
That's such a great idea. Thanks for sharing that. Another question for you, and I love this question because I think we experienced this a little bit today. Can you talk a little bit more about videos in your presentation, or not videos in your specific presentation, but how you feel about using videos, what your recommendations are, when they fit, when they don't?
Sure. So it's kind of goes back to the idea that you're not competing against the other people in the company, you're competing against Google and Instagram. And so videos are quite powerful. You don't want them to be longer than probably 2 minutes because that people will start to drift again, right? You're back to that 8 seconds of attention span cycling over and over. But videos are fantastic to use and they're interesting. And then you can also use them strategically. Let's say it is a long presentation, right? It happens, that's standard corporate world. You can use videos to snap people back to attention because typically when they start seeing moving pictures and sound, people will snap back because they're naturally curious. And again, it's back to the idea that as human beings, we love screens. So you can actually use them strategically and they're quite interesting usually to help make your point. And it also allows your voice to take a little bit of a break and for your audience to have kind of a little bit of a break. It's quick, but the use of videos is great. I will say they tend to have the most technical difficulties, yay, as experienced today. I actually went ahead and used a software to capture this video so it's not an internet call. So the actual video file is embedded in my presentation and that is a much safer way to showcase video.
Awesome. Thanks for that advice. That's great. And then another question for you. So when you're putting a presentation together and you're thinking about the point that you want to make, how many stories are too many to share in order to keep on point?
Yep, that's great. I mean, typically it's more of like 3 stories. So let me just, actually while we're all on this together, I'll go back to mine from Startup Week. So these were all of the ideas. And at the end of the day, I told one story to make each point. And then I bumpered it with some really cool quotes and some other things to feel like a call to arms, essentially. But you certainly don't want to go on and on because then, of course, the same thing holds true. So many stories are not going to remember anything. One very powerful story is also better than 3. This happened to be 3. Obviously, this is a 6-minute presentation. Those stories were maybe 60 seconds, and that was plenty in a 6-minute presentation, but the presentation was the story of finding courage using real examples. The other great thing are using real examples and being authentic and sort of bearing yourself a little bit is people can relate to you a lot better because they know you're being honest. They know you're sharing something that you might not typically share. So that's what I would say is use them wisely and use them well. One at the very beginning is a fantastic technique, and that's plenty. Are you there, Sam?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, hey, yeah.
Great, thanks. I thought I might have accidentally pressed a mute button on my headset. I'm back. So thank you for your great insight on that last question. Another question, a few questions that have come through are about different types of presentations, the different audiences that you're giving these to. So do you feel like presentations should be structured differently or different approaches should be taken when you're speaking to an auditorium as opposed to a small team meeting of maybe 5 people, et cetera?
For sure. And it's a great point to make, and that is if you're in an auditorium, there's some interesting things. So for example, I do not like having a podium or anything between me and the audience because it disconnects you from them. I also like to try to get down in the audience if I can, or move around and pull people from the back. And so your pacing, your vocal range is very different in an auditorium versus a small team meeting. All of that said, what I believe happens is that every time you're in a team meeting or a small setting, you have an opportunity to enroll someone in your thinking into a strategy to kind of get on board. But people often blow off the small team meetings, or they don't prepare. They don't send, if you're going to have an agenda as your first thing, send it in advance. Give your different types of learners, extroverts and your introverts, give them a chance to marinate on the topics you're going to be covering. Remarkably different meetings will happen as a result of that. But back to the question, it really, yes, there are different types of presentations, but the mistake is assuming that you can take it easy on the internals and then go big on the externals.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. And then another question for you. So you had talked about individuals in the audience or in your team meeting during a presentation that are distracted and on their phones. Do you have any tips or tricks for bringing those people back into your presentation? That's part A. Part B is, if that person is the decision maker, is your style of bringing them back into your presentation different?
That's a great question. Depending, so some environments, so for example, at IDEO, which probably a lot of people have heard of that company, they have a no device rule. And so they're, except for the presenter, if they've got a screen or whatever, that's fine, but they have no devices allowed on the table. And that's based on a lot of research and that we can only do so many things at once. That said, the reality is the phone is attached to us, and our iWatches or whatever happens to be on your body has you connected all the time. So what I tend to do, and decision maker or not, one, watch the decision maker. If they're super tuned out, instead of calling it out, I just follow up differently. And I simply will send some key points in the email and the quick PDF attached, and sort of give that person a chance to give you the response that you deserve and that you were really seeking in the first place. And then a technique during those type of situations is to use vocal. It's to get quieter, to use pausing, and to use space. So use your physical form to pull them back in. You certainly don't want to stare them down, but you can get closer to them. You can take sort of a strange like the pregnant pause, and all of those little devices will pull people back in for sure. And the cool thing is, once you become known as the presenter that like gets it done in 15 minutes instead of 90, they'll start paying more attention. Change isn't simple and it isn't overnight, but you become the presenter that like everyone wants to be in meetings with you because they know that it's worth it. And you'll see the attention spans change, especially from those decision makers. And that's where it becomes magical and part of your, helps make your career. Being able to sell ideas is incredibly powerful.
Thanks, that's so fascinating. I can't wait to try it myself. We have one more question here for you, and if anyone else has any other questions that they haven't gotten in yet, please feel free to send those through that chat interface. So the question is around, you were talking about 3 key points in creating your presentation and thinking about what those 3 key points are. Can you expand a little more on how your process of how you develop them, or any tips for individuals to really develop and define those?
For sure. So it starts with thinking about the audience, what I think they probably know already, what I think they probably are curious about, and what I really need them to know and understand. And so you start to parse through it that way, and then it should reveal probably more than 3, and then you sort of get ruthless with yourself and you think, okay, if I only had 5 minutes, what are the 2 or 3 points I would make? And so you're distilling, right? And as soon as you have that distillation, then you say, okay, how many different ways can I say this? And I had one great presentation coach one time tell me it's like planting a garden. You're planting a word garden. So you've got your 3 key points, but because information's only interesting one time, you try to make them in different ways. And so even in this presentation today, my key points were made in different ways using video, using different examples, but they were all pointing to the same key point. And I used my sticky note system to keep me true to that, because it's hard. It can be challenging not to let a lot of other information creep in, because you're like, oh, everyone should know that. But if you get more ruthless about it around a distillation process, They don't really want to know all that. They'll never remember all of that. So what are the 3 things you want to really get out of this based on what you know about your audience? So it really is a distillation process, and then for you as a presenter, staying on point.
Sounds good. Thank you. Well, once again, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for joining us for today's presentation. And Rachel, thank you so much again for this great information. I know we all have so many takeaways from today, so thank you. And just a reminder to view upcoming webinars and request previous recordings, please visit our website at www.colorado.edu/alumni/webinars, and have a great rest of your day, and go Buffs.